Now, the Competition Commission has tackled about 1,500 cases of unfair pricing since the start of the COVID-19 outbreak and has since issued fines over 13 million rand. The goods in question include things like masks and sanitizers. In addition, 7 South African supermarkets are now facing 1 million rand in the form of fines for hiking food prices mid-lockdown. Consumers saw the price of essential food items such as garlic and ginger, you'll remember, soaring at some stage of the lockdown period. For an idea of the lay of the land, let's bring in Tembinkosi Bonakele, that's the Competition Commission Commissioner, and he joins us now via our telephone line. Tembinkosi, thanks very much for your time, and it's great to have you on the program. What should we read into the trends we've seen over the past year? I mean, there's about 13 million rand, which is a lot of money. Should we be worried?
Yes, initially we were worried, but through these interventions, I think that we know that our regulatory systems work, and I think that we have managed, I think, to go through the disaster with problems, but I think these problems are not insurmountable, and certainly when it comes to price gouging, our Competition Commission, the Competition Tribunal, as well as the court came through for consumers. So I'm not too worried. Of course, there are things that are beyond the control of everybody else, such as supply shortages, you know, and things like that, that lead into higher prices. But I think that our regulatory framework proved to be effective during this crisis.
And what signs are you seeing attesting to that effectiveness?
Well, if you look at what happened, initially we had a lot of factors that led to prices going up, including panic buying, but also including exploitation by retailers and suppliers. Now, most of these, if you just look at things like masks, and you look at what the prices were immediately after the lockdown was announced and the state of disaster came into effect, the prices have come down quite a lot and have somewhat stabilized. Now, that's a function probably of markets correcting themselves, but it's also a function of government introducing regulations, better regulations to deal with that, as well as the regulators themselves investigating and prosecuting these cases. So if you just look at one indicator, it would be price. The second indicator is also that we have generally managed to do away with the notion of a lockdown leading to shortages and panic buying. So I think we can, as a country now, better manage all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, you speak about prices having it stabilized, but there are also concerns that there are still remnants of opportunistic behavior, so to speak. Are you seeing that? If so, can we get examples of what this opportunistic behavior looks like?
Correct. We have been concerned with prices of certain basic food products, such as ginger and garlic, as you pointed out earlier. But this, again, is a partly abuse in that people have increased their margins according to what we've been able to look at. So the levels, such as retail levels of the value chain, we are finding that their margins for some of these products are higher than before March 2020. So that's something we have addressed mainly through advocacy. You may be aware that we reached an agreement with Pick n Pay about constraining these margins, and I can confirm to you that we are having similar discussions with other retailers, and really the idea being that you should stop this before it happens or before it continues, rather than wait and then want to fine people after the damage has been done. So I think we are making progress again in that respect, but it doesn't mean that we are out of the woods. There are retailers who continue with this, and we continue to prosecute some of them before the Competition tribunal, and you'll hear a lot more, I think, in the next couple of weeks and months about these prosecutions. But the big picture here is that you should be able to intervene at a macro level so that you can deal with legal abuses without really causing a sort of big systemic problem to how the markets operate.
Speaking about looming prosecutions, possibly, I mean, there's been criticism, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, that the fines itself are all but a slap on the wrist for some of these supermarkets who in some respects rake in profits amounting to the fines in a day, if not a week. Has the COVID-19 moment perhaps exposed a situation where there's time for policy change about the maximum punitive action that can be taken for things like price gauging or gouging?
Sure. I mean, this issue of fines is always coming up for debate whenever people feel abused. But I want you to appreciate one thing and the viewers to appreciate one thing. Intervening on price is in itself controversial. So in other words, punishing someone for charging a high price is a hugely complex thing. It's a very direct intervention in markets. We've tested it. I'll give you an example. The case we won before the court accepted that there was abuse in that a small guy who was supplying some of the PPE overcharged people. But the court also said, but these guys are small and we would stop them from doing that and teach others a lesson that this is unlawful, but we will not impose any fine. So the fine was zero. And that talks to really the reluctance of some in society, including the courts, of saying when you are intervening in markets in that manner directly, you don't want to be a price regulator, but you want to stop the abuse. So admittedly, the fines are low, but I think there is general consciousness throughout the system that these are special times, require special measures. And I must say that I was quite happy that the courts were even prepared to intervene and say this conduct is unlawful. By the way, nobody has done this in the world. South Africa is the only one that has intervened successfully in this manner. So I think we should watch that it's not about blood on the floor. It's about correcting how markets work.
That's an interesting perspective, and perhaps leads us aptly to discussing the processes undertaken by the Competition Commission when deciding to call for a fine to be imposed. Because we know that sometimes prices can go up because of supply and demand externalities. For instance, if there's a natural disaster that hits the country, we expect some things to run in shortage, or if there's a drought, for another extreme. When you decide that, a entity has hiked prices unjustly, what do you look at? Because those aspects could have contributed to those price hikes, if you get what I mean.
Right. I must say, firstly, those are very rare cases, not only in South Africa, but across the world, where you have an offense in competition law that's called excessive pricing. This happens when the person charging the price has no constraint from the market. In other words, they are a dominant firm. There are no other competitors who could offer the product, or they are able to squeeze their suppliers, and the consumers really have no choice but to buy from this monopoly provider of the product. So they have what we call market power. So once you have market power over your buyers or consumers, then you do run a risk that if your conduct is so egregious, so in other words, you really can't justify it when you look at cost margins, when you look at comparable prices elsewhere in the world, when you look at comparable prices of a similar product, you cannot justify it. In those rare circumstances, in South Africa at least, authorities can intervene and prosecute you for what is called excessive pricing. So you must have market power and you must have abused it.
That's incredibly interesting. Very quickly, where in the supply chain typically does the Competition Commission intervene? I'm asking this in the back of reports I had seen that, I think it was the Mercury in Durban, suggesting that The globe is seeing a shortage in syringes, and there had been real concerns about what that means for South Africa as we enter our vaccination program. You know, can the Competition Commission be able to look at what that might mean for pricing for syringes in South Africa at that level, or is it more just for consumers at a more micro level on the ground, so to speak?
So we could. I mean, we look at the effect of that in South Africa. So wherever the conduct may have originated from, we can look at it and at whatever level of the value chain. So it could be the manufacturer, it could be the distributor or wholesaler or even the retailer. We can intervene. This is not to say it is without difficulties. Obviously, obtaining information from foreign firms who are not within our boundaries does sometimes prove to be a difficulty. But it doesn't mean that our law doesn't extend beyond our boundaries for as long as the conduct complained of has an effect in South Africa.
Tembinkosi Bonakele, really appreciate your time. Interesting discussion there, if I say so myself. Tembinkosi Bonakele is a commissioner with the Competition Commission. Thanks very much indeed.